McLean, founder and CEO of Dylan Green, and today I have with me Gia Schneider. Gia is joining us from Natel Energy. She's based in the Bay Area. Thanks for joining me, Gia.
Thanks for having me on your podcast, Catherine.
So congrats on recently being featured by Time and Bloomberg, as well as being named, this is, hopefully I get it right, Fast Company's World-Changing Ideas 2022 list, alongside a host of other breakthrough energy venture companies. So for those of you who don't know, can you briefly explain what solutions Natel provides and how your solutions are unique?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first off, it is definitely an honor to be included in those lists, and really a testament, frankly, to the work of a whole team, that the team that we have here at Natel. That is really the reason why we've had these accomplishments. So just in terms of what we do, we were founded with a focus on making hydropower, which is a renewable energy source that we've had for a long time. It's actually the world's largest source of renewable energy today. And we wanted to bring it, modernize it, basically address some of the sustainability hurdles that that hydro faces. And specifically, we do that through fish-safe turbines. So if you think in a wind turbine, the blades that spin, in hydropower, similar, water moves blades. And what we have developed is a really cool way to make those blades safe for fish to pass through without compromising on power output or efficiency.
Okay. So how exactly is Natel enabling hydropower to become more sustainable and fish safe? Could you, there was an example, I know that Natel conducted a series of DOE supported studies in the Pacific Northwest. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, what happens in hydropower, I have I put turbines in the water, I move water through them. And so of course, whatever is in that water, I either need to be able to pass through my powerhouse or send it around. And so the conventional turbines that we have today do a mixed job, frankly, at passing fish. Some do pretty well, others not quite as well. What we saw, though, was an opportunity to really focus in very specifically on the ability to have turbines safely pass fish through the turbine. And the reason why we want to do that is because if we can pass fish safely through the turbine, then we can put more of the water through the powerhouse and generate more energy with it. And we can also reduce the complexity of the project. We don't have to have screens and some of the other things that can add both capital cost and ongoing O&M cost to hydropower projects. So the way that we accomplish this is the design of the blades, basically, has been modified. Our specific blade design is one where we have a very thick leading edge. So conventional blades are very thin. And our design basically has a very thick leading edge. That thick leading edge basically creates like a pressure field, if you will, ahead of the blade as it moves through the water. And that basically helps to deflect fish around the blades, as opposed to a thin blade where I end up with a direct strike. And that's kind of the core in a very simplistic way. And then in terms of proving the results, we have done a number of tests at this point with independent third parties, including Pacific Northwest National Labs, Kleinschmidt Associates, Alden Research Lab. Anyhow, testing eel, trout, and a type of river herring in both field and lab conditions. So kind of range of data, range of test conditions, range of species. And we've consistently demonstrated greater than 99% safe passage for different types of fish across a very broad range of operating conditions.
Amazing. I want to talk a little bit about your upbringing. It sounds like you had an interesting upbringing, having lived in a log cabin in Texas. I don't always associate log cabins with Texas, so learn something new every day that your dad built. And I believe your dad was also a doctor, an inventor, a farmer, a sailor, and you and your brother formed Natel together by leveraging technology that your father developed. Can you talk about how your upbringing influenced your career trajectory and the challenges you face at Natel?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the log cabin was, it was only a log cabin in the sense that it was built from logs, and it had a somewhat rustic appearance, but in other cases it was a fairly modern house. I think from an upbringing perspective, one of the big influences was the fact that my father, like as far back as I can remember, was very focused on climate change as being, frankly, a serious challenge that we, as a whole Earth, would have to address. And so I like remember having conversations with him that were, probably when I was like mid 80s, so it must have been like 7 or 8, where he would talk about climate change as being hotter, wetter, colder, drier. He was like, there's all these things, and ultimately, warmer air holds more water, and therefore we're going to have a more like more velocity in our water cycle, and then that has a whole set of impacts. And the bottom line is, it means some places will get hotter, some places colder, other places wetter, other places drier, and it's all going to be just a lot of change. And it's funny is like in the last year, I feel like that basically, like I've started to see, articles which talk about exactly that, like put those words in the same, in the same phrase. So that really for me was the grounding focus for, wanting to spend my work or my life like focused on tackling climate change.
Right. Yeah. And I guess your brother shared the same feelings.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we grew up together. Obviously, we grew up together, and we both went through this. And I think that we expressed our interest in tackling climate change in slightly different ways. We both are technically engineers. I say technically in my case because while I have an engineering degree, really my career has been focused in more of the finance and business side of renewable energy. And whereas my brother stayed focused on the engineering side. But in some ways that kind of gave us very complementary skill sets as we then move forward to start Natel. Sometimes we used to joke with my dad if he did he plan this in some way? So I think similar motivations for us, and then we've expressed it in different ways, and then that's helped us as we partner together to build Natel. It's been, frankly, I think really, really helpful to have those different perspectives and different strengths.
Where does the word Natel come from?
Natural electric.
Natural.
Yeah. So when we were starting the company, we had, definitely had a discussion, as everybody does, around like what to name it. And it's not, I honestly, I think some people love name, thinking I would like, it was one of those ones where I was like, okay, I think this will work. It kind of encapsulates what we do. We can talk about it really quickly. And like, we need to get on with like figuring out what we're doing. And that was the genesis of the name.
Oh my gosh, I've named 2 companies and it is like the hardest thing ever. And then when you do it, you're like, oh, that was so obvious.
Yeah.
Why did it take me so long to think of it? But your dad must be like super proud, obviously, of you guys.
Yeah. He was, he was a part of getting this all going, and I think really, it's been good.
Awesome. So I noticed that you guys are working now in Africa, and you're working with a hydropower startup called MyHydro to provide greater energy access to places like the Congo. You also worked with Apple in Oregon. What are some of the projects that you're most proud of, and why?
Well, I think that those are 2 to start with. I think that I'll start first, with the project in Oregon. That was a project which, again, the things that have been really transformational for us about that project are that we actually installed the turbine there in the late summer of 2020. And really it's a testament. Lots of cool things have happened at the project. But just the fact that we were able to, as a team, execute and get that project installed and online within 2 weeks of the original date, when obviously COVID happened.
Amazing.
It's just, again, really a testament to the team doing an incredible job managing through some very, obviously, thinking back to like March, April of 2020 is a little mind-boggling now. So that's one, and I just call it that accomplishment. And then we've been able to, at Monroe, like show that the turbine is reliable, that it's generating energy as expected. We've been able to do a lot of several different fish passage tests there in the field with Pacific Northwest National Lab. And so that's been really great because that has been giving us the data, some really conclusive data around very high levels of, greater than 99% safe fish passage. And then looking forward to the project coming up in Africa with MyHydro, we're really excited to get going on that. It's been I think what MyHydro's vision is to build hydro-backed microgrids to bring really, again, much needed electrification to some areas that are obviously don't have very good energy access right now.
Right.
And so that can be super exciting. It'll be a good, really, really great way. Africa has a ton of hydro potential, huge amounts of energy potential. Most of it to date has been developed in really large mega projects, and those projects, while they're good at generating energy, they tend to not bring the benefits of electrification to rural communities and smaller communities. And so we're really excited to work with MyHydro on addressing that part of the market.
Yeah, it's just so important, isn't it? It's like the corporations come in and solve one issue, but don't necessarily aren't inclusive, which is just such a shame.
Right.
So as Natel is the first company you have founded and been the CEO of, how did you know what to do when it came to running and growing a business? Like, what advice would you give others who are also looking to build their first climate tech companies?
Yeah, I think I'd sum it up, and this will sound very oh, this is all obvious from the beginning. And I think that's maybe a first starting point, is that it's not all obvious at the beginning. So, one thing that a core thing is to learn and adapt, and to be kind of fairly relentless about asking yourself constantly the question of, do I understand my problem? Do I understand my customers? Do I understand the solution? And do I have a good fit for how? Because that is very fundamentally what we're trying to do, right? Solve a problem with a product, get that out to customers, and that has to match. And so, like, you have to constantly question that and make sure that there's a good fit. I think the other piece is that, and we've done that from the beginning, so I think that's been an important element. There are times when I wish we had pushed when we'd been more aggressive in our questioning, because I think it would have helped us make certain adjustments more quickly. But again, that's something that you just learn over time. And that leads to my second point, which is that inevitably you will make mistakes, and there will be things that you're like, oh, I wish I'd done something. And I think the key there is to not get bogged down in, to take the learning without regrets, because
without beating yourself up.
Because regret is like it's an emotional energy drain that there's so much that you need to do in building a company. You have to learn and keep moving. So
no, I hear you. It's you learn more from the mistakes. It's just irritating that you wind up learning more from the mistakes, because you seem a little similar to me, that you're probably like a little bit of a perfectionist, and so you want everything to go right all the time, and unfortunately it just it doesn't always happen. So just not beating yourself up about it for too long.
Exactly.
So how has your management style changed over the years, and can you share anything you've learned about what it takes to be an effective leader?
Yeah, it's funny. So we definitely have changed quite a bit. So we're now 65, maybe a few more people now, and that brings a lot of change, right? So one important thing for me that I think I'm still learning from, or like evolving in, is the fact that my role changes over time. From in the early days, you do a lot, or I did a lot
everything,
of things, right? And now it's much more about enabling people on the team, finding good people, and then enabling great people to shine. And that I think is ultimately then more of my job. And I think that is a hard, like, you just have to learn that. I would rate myself as like, I'm figuring that out. And I think the other really important thing for me as we've grown as a company is to really focus then on finding great people, like people who are better than me at those specific things,
Yep.
because again, that's the only way you build a strong team that is actually able to scale.
Yeah.
On the leadership side, I think that's again something that for me is kind of evolving, where there's a lot of like outward facing leadership increasingly, in terms of like telling our story. So it's like one thing to lead and another thing to manage, right?
Sure. Sure.
And so another kind of evolution for me is understanding the difference between those two, and then being more intentional about, again, the things I need to do to be a good manager versus the things that I need to do to be a good leader.
Yeah. No, I got you. And has that come from experience, or do you utilize any sort of like tools? Because I get asked all the time by companies, like everybody seems to be using like a different kind of assessment on how they work well with others, or like how they play in the sandbox together.
Yeah. I think that we do have some, we've kind of have done a couple different, used some services with respect to like coaching and manager training.
Yeah.
And I've definitely, I would say it's in general on balance useful. I mean, there's no great like one answer, and it's probably why
Yeah.
you see a lot of things, because at the end of the day, it does come down to like, I think I have to do work to figure out what works, and some of what works will work well for one part of the team, but not for other parts. And I think that's also a constant evolution. And then, but I think there are some, key grounding principles that you can take away, which is that, and again, I would say, for us, we're at a point in our journey which I think every startup finds, where you'll have moments where you're growing fast and you're just like so stretched, so you don't necessarily have time as a team to do as much of like the cleanup organization around processes and tools. And so we're definitely in a state where we have some process organization debt to dig ourselves out of, or to like close. And we're in the process of doing that now. And I think that's also just something that you've got to like constantly figure out how to
Yeah.
balance. So
Yeah. It's hard when you're so busy to do the like reflection. It's like,
yeah.
So looking back, what would you have told yourself 10 years ago? Is there anything that you would have done differently?
Oh, I think my answer to that will be that absolutely. There's a whole, from a learning perspective, but it's very hard. I think that maybe the key things are, again, kind of make sure that you question, because as I mentioned, there were I think a few times where if we had questioned ourselves a little bit more rigorously on
Yeah.
our product market, like that specifics, we would have made adjustments more quickly and
Yeah.
would have helped accelerate our path into the market. And that's kind of the core. Like you got to keep that questioning. The more that you can, because that's how you validate that you're matching, that your hypothesis is that you're gathering data that's moving you towards
Right.
a conclusion that
It's not enough to it's not enough to just be a mission-driven organization. There has to also be a need that you're filling in the market, like you said.
And that you need to go to your whoever the stakeholders, customers, client, like however you would characterize the external parties that you are, delivering value to, make sure that you're getting feedback from them.
Great.
And again, it's a balance, right? Because with this energy transition, we're definitely like a whole host of innovators across the space are trying to do, big things to change, fundamentally transform the way our economy works, right? We're trying to electrify everything. We're trying to move away from, fossil fuel. Those are massive changes to the like foundational elements of our economy. And so there's an element of like, if you think back maybe 10, 12 years, right, when Tesla was just like early, Elon Musk, lots of different things and opinions, but at the end of the day, with respect to electric vehicles, like fundamentally the view on EVs has 100% transformed, right?
Right.
And in the early days, and like there are things like that as we make this transition where it's like, there's one element that you have to have belief, right? Which is like this is something that we need to do, and then there's an element to, are we making progress? As I do that hypothesis testing, and there's always a bit of a mix there, because you could have said in the early days of EVs, perhaps the hypothesis testing would have said you need to stop, but the reality is actually that, so there's a balance there.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, and I wish you all the best and everything that you're doing for a clean energy economy and women, being a woman CEO. So
Yeah. It's funny because I don't actually think it's interesting. I am hopeful on that front. I think that there's a lot of good positive change, because I don't tend to often am not always as conscious actually of that being the label I need to apply, and I think that's really good from the perspective of I don't know. It's one of those things we pay attention to because we want to continue to build diversity intentionally, and it requires intention. But at the same time, it's also good that if that can become the norm, become more of like a common thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with you, but I think that there are definitely women who, when they see companies or evaluating companies that are led by either a woman CEO or just women leadership in general, are confident in the knowledge that those companies are going to be a certain way, and seek out those organizations. And I think what's nice is there are, like you said, there's more organizations now for them to look at, because everyone's hiring. So the candidate is running the show, so they can choose where they want to go.
Absolutely.
And if that's important to them, then that gives you a really good USP, because I see a lot of companies trying to do it retroactively to try and do diversity. It's easier just to do it in the beginning
from the start.
Diversity begets diversity.
Absolutely. And that maybe be the other point, like in terms of recommendations to startups, is like focus on it early. Like you will hear sometimes from investors and other folks that like, you just need to like go and it's sometimes easy to have a default profile, particularly of like experience of, that has, done it before and knows how to scale a business. And it's a balance, but I do think that if you don't, as your company grows, you will be trusting the people you hire, the senior leadership team, to hire more people. And if you haven't started, it just is so much harder to retroactively fill in. So.
All right. Well, thanks again for your time, Gia.
Thank you. Have a great day.